Hello everybody, and today I'm bringing to you something special. And over the past few weeks I've been working very heavily on the mysterious woods, and throughout that journey I've been recording the entire work process of creating this map, and it's finally ready to show it to you all. Now we're not going to see any gameplay footage here, sadly. Still going to be a little bit of time, perhaps a week or so, before everything is in-game, all the actors are perfect, and there's going to be some extra special actors and new NPCs that are going to exist in this area as well, so they're going to take an extra amount of time added on, as well as all the bug fixes and everything else. So through this video, please be aware that this video is, I think it's around 17 times the speed, so there's a lot of hours of work actually put in here that are going to be shown very, very quickly. The second thing also to mention is that this map has actually been worked. This is the fourth time I've reworked this map from scratch, and you're probably wondering why I've done that. And basically, as I progress and develop my skills in making this mod and this patch, this expansion for Ocarina of Time, what happens is that new techniques are developed that allow for more polygons. So, for example, the first development was to allow a greater RAM usage, which allowed for more polygons to be displayed on screen. And then I reworked the map entirely again. Then again, it happened that I ended up finding a way of loading maps and data from completely free space and actually expanding the size of the ROM itself, and then therefore there were actually no data restrictions. Of course, there were only a certain amount of polygons can be displayed on screen that the engine allows, but I could allow for a much bigger collision file, I could have more textures and a much more detailed map once again. And then of course there are just the early attempts that I didn't enjoy as much and didn't think quite had a strong sense of quality of my work, so I've ended up working on those and redoing the whole thing a couple of times over. So you might be wondering when you're looking at this, hang on, I didn't see you make that tree or that mushroom or that tunnel or lantern, and it's actually because a lot of these assets were already made and reused in other maps, so don't worry about that. Secondly, I also want to talk here about the length of time and some of the things that have changed. Now, I had hoped originally, before this whole underground thing took place, to have a demo out for the entire public, to have that out in about 8 months. Now, sadly, due to the fact we've had to go underground, giving away a ROM to the community before the project is finished creates a security risk, basically. We are then all suddenly at risk of just one person happens to share the unfinished product, and they might think they were doing good by doing it, or they may not have had a mistranslation in language or anything, but if they ever do that, then potentially we'll get a cease and desist. I keep saying we'll, I mean as in the entire community here, because obviously even though I'm the one working on this is our project together. So that's no longer going to happen. There's no longer going to be a public demo in 8 months. However, there is going to be a demo for those of you who have donated on the Patreon page, who are donating above $10 a month. Now, that feels a bit hard to say because I don't want there to be an equity divide in amongst my viewers, but the reality is that if somebody's donating $10 a month, they've made an active investment in the security and success of this project. So I feel it easier to trust those people, because why would they have donated money and then risk not getting a finished product? Do you see what I mean? So there's a certain level of trust built with those people. Though those people will be getting a demo within the 8 months, but sharing that demo amongst anybody else or showing it on YouTube is an absolute no. You can't do that, because as I said before, that's breaking rule number 1. At this point, I'd also like to give a massive thank you to everybody who actually has been donating and supporting the project thus far. I mean, it's such a tremendous thing to have had such amount of support and love of my work. It's absolutely incredible. And thanks to you, I've been able to drop 8 hours a week at work. Now, bear in mind that at the moment, I've only been able to work on the mod somewhere around 12 hours a week. So that's 2 hours a night, 6 days a week. Immediately after I get home from work, in between my studies from university, I've been able to work on this. So now I am only working 30 hours a week instead of 40. Now I'd very much like to be able to drop that down further so I could get this project and mod to be absolutely everything it can possibly be as soon as possible. But obviously I'm just overwhelmed by the generosity people have already shown me for the fact that and that tremendous help. So I'm now able to work on the mod approximately 20 hours a week now instead of just 12. So thank you so much. Secondly, or rather finally, I expect this, the length of time I expect this all to take, I expect it to take approximately 2 years from now until its completion, until its full term. Now, to a lot of you, you're going to think, wow, 2 years is a long time to wait. But the reality is, Pokemon Prism was in development for 8 years. Project Third Quest, and I know this because I've spoken to Spire and a few of the other members myself. They've actually, Third Quest this is the 5th year for Third Quest has been in production. And many other mods take a long length of time, just like this, to be able to come to full term and completion. So 3 years for an entire 3D game for one person to make, that's not a lot of time. So with all of that said, I very much hope you like the footage and everything here. There's a lot of time and a lot of effort put into all of this. And to those of you who haven't donated and wanted to get your hands on a demo, I'm terribly sorry about that. It's all about trust. And I'd be incredibly foolish if I just gave this away and trusted absolutely everybody in the project. So thank you very much, and I hope you all understand that otherwise somewhat controversial and difficult decision on my part.
Now the very first step here was just to sort of sketch out a basic layout of the maps that we want, and I'm really copying the style here of Majora's Mask, because for me that map at the beginning of the game, it was so disappointing we didn't go back to get to explore that. It just begged for exploration, and yet we never got that satisfaction, sadly. So that's been a big inspiration in this map. Of course I had made these tunnels previously in an earlier map, so basically just sketching out some early designs of the layout that I want the map to have, and this method here for me has been the most effective way. After a few different times of practicing different methods of making these kind of labyrinth style maps, this has been the most effective method thus far. Shaving off some of the unnecessary parts here and then pushing all the actual maps themselves through and rounding them off so they look a little bit more natural. Now we're adding some more organic geometry here, some of the hills and things like that, just to round off the edges of the landscape that your eyes are actually going to be seeing, so not everything is terribly flat. At this point I'm just smoothing out the surfaces so I've got something easier to work with and there aren't any glitches or anything like that. Adding in a few more tunnels here, and as you can see it's long tedious work, but it's all worth it. So now that more organic shapes are really starting to come together, and the map's starting to finally, this was after a few hours, believe it or not, started taking shape. It really is a lot of work here. But at the same time, it's very therapeutic. And now at this point, I start mapping in some textures. It's very difficult to sort of get, as you can see here, every texture needs to line up perfectly with this edge. Now this is something I notice a lot of people don't do when they're making mod projects. But it pays off so much to do this, because it just completes the map. It's long, it's tedious work, and it isn't fun, but it just makes everything look more natural, more realistic, and just cleaner. And it's those little details that I think make this look more professional than just simply if I had just chosen the standard texture without the edging. So again, it's very tedious work, but it really is worth doing. And a specific thing when I designed this texture as well is that I wanted it to be quite forgiving. So say bits and pieces were at different angles, but during the gameplay, unless you look very closely, you may not actually necessarily notice. So we're just fixing some of these edges again, and then applying those textures more and more. Just making sure everything looks neat, everything is nice and trimmed, and all the edges meet up nicely. And this is probably one of the more tedious parts of making the maps, because it's not distinctly creative, but it just is so worthwhile. And yet very few people seem to do it in these kind of lower level projects. And what you'll also notice I'm doing here is I'm actually cutting out gaps in the walls, so the tunnels fall more seamlessly from one to the other. And at this point, this is going to be an exit here, or rather the entrance to the entire map. That's why I had that long, dark, faded out tunnel, to give the perspective of there being a great depth there, that it fades into a distance. Techniques that were obviously used in Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask themselves. So now I'm just rounding off the edges here, trimming away the fat effectively of things that I don't need anymore, and adding in a little bit more of vertical geometry and changes into the map. They're going to be interactions that the player will actually have to use, and use items to get across. Now thus far you haven't seen me make any textures or anything like that, because they'd already been made in other maps, but here you're about to. I was really happy with how this bridge came out, actually. Because I wanted this map to feel like it was actually lived in, you see. A lot of the other woods and things, particularly the Lost Woods, it didn't feel like it was a real place to me. It was always the map that I was actually very disappointed in when playing Ocarina of Time. And the step up in the Lost Woods variation that we had in Majora's Mask was from the start of the game, was such a dramatic step up, and I desperately wanted to keep that style, and I felt like this bridge just made the map feel like it was actually lived in. Like there was something happening here. There was a history. Why was there this bridge built? Why was it there? This man-made structure in the center of this otherwise overgrown and very dense woodland. So here I'm making the brick texture, and this is how I make every texture you see in game, is that I hand paint them like this. Just piece by piece, building it up layer by layer. Adding some nice backgrounds in, some moss and some gradients, giving it that sort of dimensionality, that texture, so it has a story behind it. It looks like time has passed. You don't want everything to look clean all the time. And there we go. Just darkening it up a little bit, changing the hue. Until we get it perfect and it fits in with the rest of the setting. Now there's something I notice is that a lot of app developers do, is that they'll just copy and paste textures they find for free on the internet. And I hate that, because a lot of the time they don't match up. You can tell that they were drawn by two different artists, whereas there's sort of a continuity in my work, is that you can see it all fits together because of course they're all painted by myself. And I'm adding a little bit of bunting here, just again to give that sort of lived in feel. Where I live there's a Buddhist temple, and in a lot of the woods and things like that you find prayer flags, and I really like that, so I decided to add that in at this point to give some character to this woodland. Now at this point I decided I also didn't like the wooden texture that was used on the inside of the tunnels themselves, so I started and decided to repaint it at this point, adding some little gradients here and there, and giving some character to wood with these nice swirls, something that I loved in Majora's Mask, how the textures had this character that Ocarina of Time seemingly lacked in many ways. Again, adding just some more geometry here and there, little ponds where there might be little fishes swimming and living, to create this area to make it feel alive. And at this point I'm adding some lanterns, sort of really going in for that feel of the fact this is a place that people come and perhaps even worship on the island. It's a place of spiritual significance. And adding in some roots and things coming from the trees that make it seem gnarled and alive, as though it is mysterious, really creating that atmosphere that gives it its name, the mysterious woods. And now, of course, what mysterious woodland would be complete without mushrooms? All different shapes and sizes. And these are also landmark points, as well as these old trees that you'll see from each room to give you sort of perspective of where you are in the map. And adding these trees and really copying that style that was used in Majora's Mask. Fixing up some of these textures, making sure everything is looking perfect. Now adding in some of these long grass that were just so characteristic of Ocarina of Time and the N64 era of Zelda gaming. It just really makes it feel like a real Zelda game. That style of grass. It was just iconic, something so simple and yet very iconic of that game genre. Now adding some of my own custom plants here to make this feel a bit overgrown, a bit wild, like it is a real woodland. And at this point everything really starts coming together, you see. Adding in the exit here for the Moblin hideout, that it is going to be located inside the mysterious woods rather than just outside. And some nice tree stumps here and there also. Again, copying that style of the tree stump that Saria was sat on in Ocarina of Time, sacred forest. At this point I'm adding in the exit into the old hag's potion shop that you remember from Link's Awakening. Just smoothing more details, finishing touches, polishing as much as I can. Now at this point I start separating everything out into groups, and this is going to make life a lot easier for in a moment when I have to cut this entire map into pieces so it can be loaded into individual rooms, which is what I'm doing here. For you see, Ocarina of Time cannot load that many polygons at once, so you have to cut everything into rooms and then put these sort of black transitions that fade one map into another, whilst at the same time creating an illusion that the whole thing has been loaded at one point. And I really wanted to make this video because I feel a lot of you out there are very much interested in games development, not just Zelda games, but you're very much interested in the development side of this also, and that's something that I feel I can give to you, and I can show you a little bit of an insight into how games actually work behind the smoke and mirrors. So just erasing everything that isn't necessarily needed to be seen from each map. And it's a long process, it's very tedious, but it's worth it in the end because it sort of creates an optimization that these maps run much more smoothly than it would if I just sort of haphazardly cut away pieces. So I'm exporting each map each time as a separate OBJ file, ready to import as a different room of the overall map. Now at this point I start working on the collision file, and this is probably the most tedious part, because I have to sort of shave away everything that I've already created and cut it down to its bare basics. And this really is tedious work at this point. And I'm not showing everything here. There are some parts that I've cut away and I'm not showing because I've thought they've not been very entertaining. And you probably already get a gist of the process that everything goes through. So as you can see, I've got to somehow simplify around 10,000 polygons, which is what the map had in total, to somewhere around less than 2,000. In order for it to all work and run smoothly without any lag or glitches. And of course the collision file doesn't need the texture maps, which is why you'll see me erasing them as I go through. Here we are, here's the final collision map. I did cut away a lot there because it's a long process and a very boring process. Now I hope everybody's enjoyed this video and to give you a little bit of a deeper insight into how everything's done here.